Hi folks, welcome to the channel. My name's Colin, call sign MM0OPX. Over the last few months, I've had a few comments on my videos regarding CW or Morse code, and specifically how did I learn, how long did it take me to get to the level that I'm at. So I want to talk to you a little bit about my CW story, how I learned it, and basically my experiences so far. So CW, it's not mandatory when you sit your amateur radio license anymore. It's like that in most countries now, I believe. But when I actually sat my foundation back in 2011, when you did the foundation license, there was a, we'll call it a mandatory test, if you will, for CW, but not really in the sense it was only really a taster or a familiarization. And basically what that was the students, we basically sat down and we were given a piece of paper and we were given a crib sheet, and it had A to Z on it and 0 to 9. And the instructor basically sent us characters, so they might send dada or dot dash, and we would simply look down the sheet and say, okay, that's A, and write it down. And they would keep sending that same character until we got it down. Eventually we would have a sentence or a few words spelt out, but that might have taken 20 minutes. But that was the only purpose of it. Once you had done that, you got your sheet signed, and that was you then good to sit the exam. I believe they've done away with that now with the advent of online exams. So I did that. I did my intermediate, and shortly after that I did my full license. So I did that, and I was still in learning mode, so I wondered what I was going to do next. So I seen a few guys at the club, and I seen them on CW, and you know, I'm a little bit interested in that. So I talked to one of the guys and says, oh, I wouldn't mind learning CW. He says, you need to speak to John, who's now sadly silent key, GM3FDN. Now he's I think he was 86 or 87 when he actually taught me CW. But anyway, so this guy, John, I hadn't met him before, came in at the club, introduced myself and told him, you know, I'd like to learn CW. So he says, right, come with me. So he took me through to the little Morse practice room that we had. And he sat me down and says, great, you know, I'd love to teach you Morse. He says, but I need the commitment from you. He says, if you're not going to commit and I'm not going to see progress every week, then I'm not going to teach you. He says, but other than that, I'll give you all the support you need. And that's exactly what he did. So prior to this, I actually had bought a bencher key. Paddles, actually. I don't quite know why, because it was far too early to be buying them. And I said to him, I says, oh, I think I already know the characters. And he looked at me, do you? He says, oh yes. I says, I've been learning them. I says, I've been just sending CW. And he said to me, stop. He says, no. He says, unless you can receive CW, he says, you're wasting your time sending, because 90% of CW is receiving. He says, if you can receive well, chances are you'll be able to send well, and it will become absolutely naturally, as I found out later on. So that evening, opened up a magazine and started sending me some very slow CW, probably about 10 words per minute, 8 words per minute. I didn't copy any of it, and he just did that to prove his point. So he says to me, look, he says, here's what we're going to do. He says, we're going to learn 6 characters every week. We don't need to learn any more than that. So he says, A, B, C, D, E, F. He says, that's all I want you to learn. So I says, right, okay, and I'm thinking, how am I going to do this? So I went home and I found a program called G4FON, who I believe is now actually Silent Key, but his program. And you could basically, it's a Morse teaching software. And you could basically program it to send whatever characters you want, the length of session, etc., etc. So you could basically tell it, just send A to F randomly over a 2-minute, 10-minute, however long period. Now, I would say that I learned with the Koch method, and what I mean by that is character speed was probably being sent at, say, 15 words per minute. So da, excuse me. Yeah, so say da, an example for CQ. So your character speed would be at the correct speed, but the effective word speed would be much slower, and I would say that is much better to learn. Morse code is very much like a musical instrument. If you've learned a musical instrument, it's much like that, although it's not as difficult, I would say, but you do need that sort of level of commitment. Now, if you set it with very slow Morse, you effectively you're counting the dots and dashes. And by the way, we don't say dots and dashes, we just say dits and das, because that's how you hear them. Da 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 da. That's how you hear them. When your brain starts to translate Morse, or mine anyway, basically if I hear Morse, my hand just writes it. I don't translate the word. I'm not there yet, but I'll get to that later on. But basically, I'll just start writing, and my hand just automatically translates. My brain is doing it subconsciously, and when I look back at what I've written, it makes perfect sense. So anyway, I went away, learned these 6 characters, but I was putting so much effort into it. I was single at the time, a lot of spare time on my hands. So basically, I think the first week I did the first 6 characters, easy peasy, probably about 10, 12 words per minute I learned it. He says, right, go away and learn the next ones. So I think over the next 3 weeks, I had learned the rest of the alphabet and 0 to 9. So probably over the course of, I don't know, 4, 5 weeks, I had learned up to a speed of probably about 12 words per minute, 15 words per minute, just on those characters. So what John would do is, he would basically, every week, he would have, he went away and he'd done his homework actually. He actually had written out groups of characters, numbers, letters randomly, because if you're writing down words, quite often you'll start to predict and you'll stop listening and you'll say, oh, that's what they're saying, but that's not the thing to do. So that's what John did. So basically he got me up to that kind of 15 words per minute. I've got some regrets there, because at the end of it he says, right, once you get to comfortably 15, 16, 17 words per minute, I'm going to make you sit the old 12 word per minute test, and I never actually did that, and I kind of just, I don't know why I didn't need to do it, but in the old A, and for the old A license, you needed to do this 12 words per minute test. So that was kind of receiving. After that, I didn't do much sending with John. I don't even think I took my key, and it was all receiving that I did with him. But with doing the receiving, the sending just done completely natural. Now I've got 2 keys now. I did have that bencher, but I sold it. I didn't like it. I've now got a Vibroplex Deluxe. I absolutely love that. I bought that second hand on eBay. Use that in the shack. A dream to use. And I've also got a CW Morse Travel key, or I think they call it a portable paddle or something like that. 3D printed. Great, functional, but it doesn't have the finesse of the Vibroplex. Now, when you get to about, I'm going to say 12, 15 words per minute, you need to make QSOs on the air, because that's the only way you're going to get learned. You're going to learn in the ways of Morse, because there's no point learning it otherwise. So I probably got, I was probably a little bit faster than that. I was probably 15, 16. I should have been on the air before that. I wrote out a crib sheet of some 3 or 4 paragraphs, basically basic QSOs. My name is, operator is, signal report, weather, location, that type of thing. So I went on to 40 meters this evening, and I turned the speed down. I think I turned it down to about 12, so I was really slow, and I called CQ. Second CQ, a station came back to me. The sweat starts running from me. No joke. The fear. If you've ever experienced mic fright, and I have as a teenager on CB, so I didn't have it on ham radio, I had that big gap, but I had that mic fright. Let me tell you, key fright is 100 times worse, certainly for me. So anyway, this G3 as it were, so the G3 is quite an old call sign, so issued in the 50s and 60s. So this station came back to me. It was beautiful CW, and he came back to me the speed that I sent, which was great. So anyway, he came back to me. I understood absolutely everything that he said. We had 3 or 4 overs. I was shaking like a leaf. Let me tell you, shaking like a leaf. What the QSO, we said our goodbyes, and I just slumped in the chair, honestly. Buzzing, absolutely buzzing that I had my first QSO on CW, because it's just a wonderful experience. There's no other mode like it, in my opinion, because you need to learn a skill to do it, and it's just so, satisfying. Now, 5 watts on CW is akin to, say, 100 watts on SSB, and I'm not joking. If you have 5 watts SSB, you're going to make a lot of contacts. 5 watts on SSB, you're going to be working the big guns a lot of the time. Unless you're at the seaside, big antenna, you're going to be working the big guns, and they're going to be doing a lot of the heavy work. You don't have that on CW. So, you know, I kept going like that, and I wasn't afraid to call CQ. Sometimes people would come back to me, dreadful CW. Now, there's nothing worse. When it comes back to you and you can't understand it, sometimes I would persevere, and other times I would just send back, no copy CW, 73, goodbye. They probably weren't very happy, and John actually taught me that. He says, do not suffer bad CW. He says it's the worst thing ever, and he's correct. So started having a few QSOs, and then at that time I started hunting DX, and I started listening to the CW exchanges. Now these guys, these stations, were sending blisteringly fast CW, high 20s, early 30s, sometimes above that, really quick working split. But all they were doing was sending your call sign back and a signal report. That was all they were doing. So pretty quickly I cottoned onto that, and I was able to hear my call sign back really quickly, so I knew if they had copied it or not. So I started working a lot of stations, a lot of rare DX. I even remember working Navasa. Now, while Navasa is not particularly far, it was #1 in the most wanted list at the time. I would come home from work at 5 o'clock, grey line, Navasa was booming, but I had to, you know, pile up, you know, from hell. But eventually, after a week, I managed to work it. I never worked it on SSB, but did the trick on CW. And I worked a lot of stations like that. If I look at my log, I worked probably more rare DX on CW rather than anything else. Cross-mode operation. Back just, you know, at the turn of the year there in December, I went down to my portable spot at South Queens Ferry over Saltwater, and I was working a pile-up. Pile-up was kind of dying off. This was on 20 metres SSB, and then this station was coming back to me. I kept getting bits of his call sign, and the next minute he just changed to CW, and I'm still listening in SSB, and he starts sending me his call sign in CW. And you know what? I copied these. I just went right into mode, because I had a written logbook. I just went right into CW mode, and I copied his call sign. He sent it twice, but I copied it the first time. And I just went back to him on SSB, repeated his call sign, gave him a 559 or something. Can't remember what exactly. So, and then he came back to me again, gave me my signal report in CW. And then the bands had actually improved, because it was grey line. He was in Florida actually, so things had just improved over that course of a minute. He went back to SSB, and we actually had a quick QSO. So that was absolutely brilliant to work, you know, cross mode. I don't really know what else to say about CW. It's just it's just an amazing mode. There's lots of resources out there to do it. I believe that there's 2 clubs in America. I think there's CW Ops, Long Island CW Club. Could be wrong on that. Apologies if I am. And I've watched some videos on YouTube, and they look really good. So I think learning CW, is good to have someone pushing you, because I've heard so many people saying, I'm going to learn CW, I'm learning CW. A year later, 2 years later, they're still saying the same thing. But going back to the beginning, you need to put effort and time into it. Like a musical instrument, you don't need to put masses of time into it, but you need to put regular slots. So say you've got 20 minutes in an evening. Say if you do 5 2-minute sessions, that's more than enough to learn a little bit at a time. Again, I was single at the time. I was probably putting 2 hours every evening, and maybe an hour of that listening to the G4 FON software, building up my characters, and I learned very quickly, because you do go through that wall when you're learning something. You get to a point, you don't get any further, and then away you go again. Something just clicks. Now what stage am I at in CW? Well, I'm up around 22 words per minute, and I say that because that's as fast as I can write. And that's the problem where I am at the minute. I can character copy about 22 words per minute, because that's as fast as my hand can write it down. My next, goal is to actually word copy. Now, I can do it with basic QSOs. That's not a problem. They come back to me, your RST 599 op, and I can get the gist of basic QSOs. I don't need to write that down. But if somebody's coming on to have a rag chew, I cannot head copy words, and that's what I need to learn to do. Now, there's a very useful tool. You've probably seen it. It's called Morse Ninja. Can't remember Kurt's name, but he's got a website. If you go into that, I'll try to put a link down in the description actually to that, and to G4FON. And basically, he's got various speeds, various different exercises. So quite often, just before I leave work in the morning or at night, depending what mood I'm in, because I have to be in the mindset to be doing it, because if you're not concentrating, again, got to be able to concentrate. Basically, I'll set one of the exercises, and it might be the top 100 words played at 25 words per minute. Or it might be the top 250 words, or it might be American call signs. And there's various different iterations of these, where they're, say, repeated just repeated twice, sent once, repeated 3 times. They get this, I think, speed racing, something like that. And that's basically where you set a base speed of, say, 20 words per minute. And they'll send you the word or the call sign at, say, 40 words per minute, then 30 words per minute, then 25 words per minute. So you're kind of picking it up faster and the work down. And by the time you get to the last speed, you should have copied it. So that's quite handy as well. Right, so I don't want to babble on too much about this, but if this can inspire even one person to start learning CW, absolutely great. It's just such an efficient mode. And actually, before I go, CW worldwide, CW last year, I put in a somewhat of an effort, I'll say. I didn't call CQ test, but basically I worked from home with the ICOM 705, 5 watts into my off-center fed dipole. I worked in the region of 250 different stations over the weekend, and I wasn't putting in big time. And the cherry on top of the cake was I worked a dozen stations into North America. Now, to work stations that were 3,500 miles plus, 5 watts, okay, they were good stations, contest stations, but working them absolutely fantastic. I think I worked 47 or 48 different countries, and to me that's quite incredible, doing it QRP. Really, really impressed. So I'm going to do the same next year again, or this year, in November, and my target is to work 50 different zones, and get a lot more points, basically, because where I was lacking was actually multiplier. So I need to get more zones and in more countries, because that is your multipliers. Okay, babbling on absolutely far too long here. 73 guys, I hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll catch you on the next one.